My family homesteaded this state before it was a state. I've had a family member in every war that this country's ever had. I had a great uncle at Pearl Harbor. My grandfather helped land people on D-Day, and my great grandfather is on the World War I Museum in Kansas City. And I think that I have never been more ashamed of this country in my whole life. And I think they're all rolling over in their graves. This is not what they fought for. And I think that President Trump needs to stand up and put a stop to it. But we know it's not going to happen because he hasn't put a stop to it for 4 years. I will be very thankful when that man is gone out of our White House. From a family of Republicans, grew up in a family of Republicans. Matter of fact, I love my family, but we've had some discussions over the last 4 years. But I think all of us would be ashamed of what's going on right now. And I know that I am. And I think my grandparents and great uncle and great grandfather are rolling over in their graves. This is not what they fought for. It's not. This is not why my grandfather was knocked. He went into the ocean several times, survived. Like I said, I had a great uncle that survived Pearl Harbor. And this is not what they fought for.
My opinion, and I think it's a good thing because it's showing the Democrats just exactly how immature, and really it kind of shows them when they was doing it back, when they was doing it themselves. That's just my personal opinion. Again, I believe everybody has a right to voice their own opinion. It's what makes this country exactly what it is. But I'm thinking it's a good thing to showing them that it's exactly showing just how kind of immature and kind of just exactly not the right way to be handling this stuff. And I think it's kind of a good thing that they are doing this as an example. Now, hitting with police officers and stuff like that, I don't agree with that, but I'm just thinking it is a good thing to do.
I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed for the country. It's not what America is about. We had an election. It was a fair election. There has been no proof of any substantial fraud or anything that would alter the results of the election. And Trump has a way of convincing people otherwise. And he encouraged these people to do wrong. And, not only did they do wrong and disrupt Congress, who was also doing wrong, but, these protests were also, they seem to be largely ignored. To me, it was a serious event. Congress was in session. They breached and really damaged the Capitol of the United States, and they were just encouraged to leave. And, we've seen lots of protests in last year, and, there were Black Lives Matters protests that were very peaceful, and, largely just people trying to get across some beliefs that there are things that need to change. And, the National Guard came out, for instance, when Trump wanted to send a message by standing in front of a church and hold a Bible, and he needed to cross the street. So he sent out the National Guard with rubber bullets and tear gas and really, to disperse the crowd. He was willing to have that type of violence to be able to cross the street. But yet Congress was in session. People came and were violent, and yet they weren't willing to send the National Guard. They weren't willing to send assistance to the Capitol Police, who were asking for help. I just feel that that's wrong, and it seems like our priorities are skewed somehow, and I'm not sure what's happened to us. But we, I think, on both sides need to stand back, take a look, and get the heart of America back, get the democracy back, and really think about what is important to us and unite and take steps to bring that back as a priority.
I am supporting the protest in as far as
the ability and the right of American citizens to be able to protest. I am a Republican. I have voted Republican for lots and lots of years. I'm 65. I've been voting in the presidential election since I turned 18. And the Democrats made the party line split very definitive. For the last 4 years, they spent millions upon millions upon millions of the American taxpayers' dollars to try to take and get rid of President Trump, to take the office. Conveniently, they decided to take, and in some of the main states that would be considered the swing state, they changed their own rules. They allowed them to take and go ahead and continue to process votes that were mailed in. I don't know for sure, and I'm consider myself not a necessarily 100% history buff, but I do believe that has not very seldom happened. And so because it was so unnormal, I should say, or not normal, it seems to be that is the question or the intent that the Republicans have questions about, is why all of a sudden in this election was the exceptions to the voting rules allowed to happen. And you got millions and millions of Republicans across the United States who are not buying the story that Biden won. My thing is, okay, so if Biden won fairly, then what would it hurt the Democrats to take and allow all the votes to be recounted from all 50 states? Those votes in all 50 states are supposed to be being protected under lock and key. Why not let the American military take and recount all of the votes from all 50 states under lock and key, and not count any of the ones from those swing states that were received 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days after November the 3rd.
You know, I think there's nothing wrong with the protests themselves. That is what our country, was basically founded on and started with. I hate that it turned violent. It never should have. That's ridiculous. I just saw where they said that they had cleared out an IED, and there's no call for any of that. But the protest itself, that's not that big of a deal. That's what our country is founded on. That's how we get our voice across, especially when we think that we're not being heard. On the news, you're seeing a lot of it being almost amped up. When I was watching it, one of the articles even read across the front that it was raging protests, but the only videos that they had to show were the normal, everyday citizens in their cowboy hats and their flannel shirts walking around with smiles on, even smiling at the camera. I know now they have the pictures of the people inside that are all dressed up, but if you even look at the two pictures, you can obviously tell they're not the same group. The group that broke into the Capitol themselves to begin with is not the same group as the peaceful ones outside. I think that's even shown when you watch the video of the peaceful protesters walking between the ropes as they're walking through the Capitol. I think another thing to point out, and I hate to say this, but you can't help but compare it to the riots that happened and the protests that happened last year. If you look at the two, again, violence should not have happened. You should have more self-control than that. But if the roles had been reversed today, you wouldn't see an almost empty chamber with a kid sitting in a chair with his hand in the air. You wouldn't see a guy smiling at a desk with a pen-written note on the paper that can be thrown away saying that we want to be heard. In those protests, what you saw was things burning, broken everywhere. You saw spray-painted signs and letters. Everything was destruction. Even when you see the protests outside today, all their fancy cars are there and sparkling clean and left alone. If you look back at the protests last year, you see the police cars overturned and people standing on them and setting them on fire. I don't think the two can be compared at all. And I also find it very frustrating when you hear on the news media, they almost want to draw a line. I can't tell you how many times I heard, they're infiltrating our building. That's our Capitol building. Even from the senators and the representatives, that's what you heard. That Capitol building is ours as a whole. That is our country. Those thousands and thousands of people that are outside the Capitol right now, that's their building as well. They're the ones who work day after day to pay the salary of those that are inside the building.
As I've watched it, I've had the same sick to my stomach feeling as I did on 9/11. I come from a family of many veterans who have fought. My father in Vietnam, my brother in Desert Storm in Iraq, my husband, and watching this country fall apart in front of our eyes is very disheartening to me. In the fact that somewhere along the lines, the two-party system has managed to completely destroy our country and and the Constitution by not being willing to work together to find resolutions to the problems that the United States has, instead of baiting and badgering each other back and forth to get their way for their party. I just really pray that something will come out of this, and that we're not going to have another civil war. I mean, because it's scary that I'm raising a 9-year-old granddaughter, and I do not want to see this kind of behavior. I teach her better than this, and we as Americans should be better than this.
Well, if it was just protesting, it would be good. I think it's good that protesting has happened, with the Black Lives Matter and with this, because, we have that right, and it needs to be used if you don't agree with something. But the hate and the violence and the borderline terrorism isn't necessary.
I was completely shocked and embarrassed and ashamed. I could not believe what I was seeing. I had heard about it on social media. I have friends on both sides of everything, and I thought, what is this? So I turned on my TV, and I really couldn't believe what I was seeing. I'm in my 30s, and so I've seen America has changed a lot since I've been growing up, but this is just not the America that I'm proud to be a part of. Like I said, I did vote for Trump, but this isn't what I voted for. I think that we need to stand together and not be divided. And over the past year and right now, we've been tearing our country apart from the inside. And so we need to do better. We deserve better, and we can be better.
Well, I was definitely really shocked to hear about some of what was going on, including the Senate and House chambers being evacuated, and the Capitol just being overrun by some of the people involved, and similar things happening in Georgia and Kansas. It was really quite shocking. Definitely left me with a really uneasy feeling. I mean, I think the main thing for me is this really is a wake-up call that I think a lot of hateful rhetoric needs to be rejected. I really hope that we can start coming together as Americans, not just liberals or conservatives, and start working together towards solutions and working to air the heel